So today we're going to talk about real estate. Two items in the news: the sale of the College Terrace Centre, and then a report from the civil grand jury about affordable housing, which is already stirring up some pretty strong discussion on Town Square. College Terrace Centre, for starters. What happened this week, Janani?
Last Thursday, the sale closed between Greystone, the property owners of the building at 2100 El Camino Real, known as College Terrace Centre to people who follow local land use stuff. And it was bought up by a local company called Blocks Ventures for a reported $78.5 million. And the sale comes at a time right before the city's penalties are set to kick in for the failure of the development to have a grocery store, which definitely elevates it in the news department.
Yeah, it seems like this property has gone through quite a lot of turmoil ever since it was built, really.
I'd say it's gone through a lot of turmoil since way before it was built. It was like years and years and years of planning, and normally we don't get into somebody bought this property discussions on behind the headlines. But I think in this case, this development had such a huge impact on the city's zoning process, planned community. It kind of the mistrust that the residents have for PC zoning, which contributed to PC zoning being abolished essentially,
right,
and created all sorts of other kind of wrinkles in the city's policies. So I do think the College Terrace was kind of the last big planned community project that the city actually approved and had the developers build. So there's a lot of implications for it as to whether the sale could facilitate the creation of a new supermarket and kind of restoring some of that public trust that was lost.
Yeah, a lot of repercussions here. And it seems like finding a grocery store in Palo Alto to fill a space has been kind of a challenge. I mean, it's not only here at College Terrace, but also at Edgewood Plaza.
Right. I mean, we saw that, what was it, more than a year or a year more, that there was an issue when the,
The Mickey's?
Yeah, the Fresh Market
Fresh
left.
Market, thank you.
Yeah.
When Fresh Market stepped in and at the college,
Edgewood Plaza.
God, what's wrong with me today? With Edgewood Plaza and its issues there, that it basically was fine after fine after fine. I think it was close to $800,000 in fines that were accrued, which a judge kicked out a considerable number of those at this point.
Yeah.
And that project didn't even have the same kind of weight behind it in terms of an agreement with the city to keep it running, and the fines that were attached to it, which would be like $2,000 a day.
There were some questions about that.
And even before that, we had Alamo Plaza, which had the same kind of thing.
Right.
The market opened, then it closed, and everybody's upset about this was supposed to be a public benefit that allowed the whole development.
Yeah.
So, yeah, College Terrace is like the third development where this is a big issue.
A lot of talk about whether or not a small grocery store is viable in this town. I mean, we're talking about a lot of ideas. People are thinking, how about an Asian market? How about a Hispanic market? Did you talk to Blocks Venture about what they're looking for?
Yeah, I talked to Jason Overman, who pretty much is Blocks Ventures. He's the CEO, and what he wasn't very specific about the type of market that's going to come in, but he was a little more specific about the kind of vibe they want to foster with this new market. And he mentioned he seemed very confident. I mean, considering the very rocky history that supermarkets have had in mixed-use developments in Palo Alto over the last decade.
Yeah.
He seemed pretty happy and pretty confident that he can get a market in a pretty short order. He said it's his biggest priority, which I guess others have said before. But his big thing is he wants to recreate the JJ&F feeling.
Right, the original market.
Yeah, it's like
for decades.
It might be a different kind of market, but he wants to kind of create a destination that people from other neighborhoods, not just College Terrace, would want to go to. He says he spent a lot of time over the years going to JJ&F, having their delicious sandwiches, which I've reported on. I can confirm they were good sandwiches.
We might have to report on the next iteration of sandwiches.
Yeah, and his wife's from the area, and he said, and she used to come here a lot. So he's got a lot of like sentimental attachment to that kind of JJ&F feel, that vibe. And he says there's a lot of different options, and he's confident that the location of development is so good that recent struggles notwithstanding for supermarkets, he thinks he can make something work.
Yeah. College Terrace Market opened in June of last year. and that it was closed already by January.
Yeah.
There were some complaints, I guess, from the owners, the market owners themselves, that they weren't getting visibility, or what did they attribute their demise to?
Well, they said for one thing that they weren't able to get adequate signage onto the building, but every time I brought that argument up to the city, they said, well, we have not gotten any proposals for signage because they have to put that in. One of the things that came out after the market closed in a lawsuit between the developer and the market owners was that the market owners, even going in, owed really a lot of money to people already.
It takes a lot to get.
Yeah, I mean, they were already, basically there were already liens against the property because the market owners did not pay for things like the refrigeration that was put in. So from day one, they came in undercapitalized, it appears. And to get those liens off, basically the developer had to, the landowner had to pay for, pay back the vendors. So they're going to be hashing that out, duking that out in court.
Yeah, okay. Well, the space is built out, and wonders whether or not another market owner, whoever that may be, will still have to put a lot out in front, or if they can arrange something so that they can become profitable rather than closing so quickly.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other thing, too, is if you look at Edgewood, I think the market at Edgewood seems to be fairly successful at this point. I think it kind of got off a little bit of a slow start, but it had the community behind it.
Sure.
And, people really wanted the market there. You go there. I was just there the other day, and there were people coming in and out. It was a lot busier than when it had started. And I think that they really created a good vibe right from the start, good relationship with the community. And that's been part of the reason for their success.
I have to note that this operator of the Edgewood Market, the market Edgewood, they actually have run another grocery store. They're established grocers. I think that was not the case.
Yes.
I mean, here
the people that they brought in, they brought in Mickey Werdis from Mickey's Farm Fresh Market. And
which was at Alma Plaza?
Which was at Alma and closed within 6 months. And that was one of the arguments that people said, right from the start they were concerned. Some people were concerned. Some people were thrilled that Mickey was going to be there because Mickey's Market was really a very beautiful spot.
Yeah.
But then
he
went all out.
Cheeses and meats.
Yes, but then you had the same situation where he was removed basically from the market owners. They just closed him down. Sent him away, and it's not clear whether or not he quit or whether he was fired, let go. But apparently there was a difference in philosophy, from my understanding. In talking to Mickey, he didn't get into many details, but he did say, well, they basically had a difference in philosophy on how to run the market, and so it's parting of the ways.
Yeah. So the new owner has to pay. It's not $2,000 a day. It's increased, right?
It's $2,240 a day because of CPI increases.
Okay, and that adds up. I think we calculated it's about $68,000 a month until they can get somebody in there. So, has the clock already started ticking, or is that next week?
It's starting July 10th, so next week it's
Tuesday or so.
Do you really think that the city will hold the new owner's feet to the fire just because he just came in? Do you think they'll make some kind of arrangement?
Your guess is as good as mine. I imagine they would. When I talked to the the interim planning director, until recently, assistant planning director John Lade, he said they intend to. They sent Mr. Oberman a letter on Monday, basically telling him about the fines and that they plan to start July 10th. It's possible that he may appeal to the council and ask them to, make some kind of waiver, some kind of exception. But, city staff is following the letter of the law, and the letter of the law, as you know, is the planned community ordinance that says you're not compliant with zoning, and this is the fine that the council had specifically set after a long discussion, precisely to prevent this kind of situation. So I'd be surprised if they don't start fining. I think there would be a big community kind of backlash if the city kind of just lets the space sit vacant for another 6 months to a year.
Yeah. This is the impact on the community, and that's who the council was thinking of in terms of the PC, public benefit. So.
But I also think the big wild card is, I think there were a lot of concerns. I think you reported on that too, and we mentioned this briefly a few minutes ago. The lack of signage, the kind of sense that First Republic Bank is kind of the by far the star tenant, and they are the biggest tenant. And
Oh, yeah, they have signs all over the building.
And the market's kind of like almost an orphan in development. They had like a little hanging sign, while First Republic is bigger. So it's possible that with Mr. Overman coming in and being so excited about the market, he might be able to give them more visibility or have some better signage, be more open to kind of elevating them and making them succeed. Whether that will happen, we'll have to see. But
We'll
at least
see.
There was really
I did notice, though, I just want to interject this, that New Mozart School, music school,
Yeah.
and some sort of a laser place, they have signs now. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like permanent signage
Okay.
up.
Right.
So they just labeled those.
Right, yeah, and that's the other thing. Well, first of all, the retail space has also been difficult to fill, it appears. It took a long time before they got anybody in there. I don't know what the reasons for that are. But the other aspect of if we go back to the market, one of the issues for the market was that they believed that, or said that they believed that they were going to be getting, doing the catering, the food service, basically for the bank, which has its, it's not just it's not a retail bank center. It is basically their,
It's an office.
yes, offices. It's
Corporate.
like a regional office, a regional headquarters, so to speak. And it turned out that the bank had its own catering group that they put in. They had their own kitchens and everything else that they put upstairs. And that's just what their corporation does. It wasn't anything that they were trying to slight or didn't think well of the market. It's just that that's what they do.
Yeah.
And they do it in all of the places that they do
That
it.
cut into their business.
kind of a strange thing for the market to not know about going into this, but
Yeah.
I can see how that would
Maybe
be.
communication was not.
Yeah, I think the market
strong.
owners believed that they were more or less told that here was an incentive for moving in. You're going to get this ability to serve this, all of these offices that are upstairs. And initially, there were a lot of people coming downstairs before they actually put the kitchen and the food service in.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, but if you're counting on that revenue for your business and
Right.
then it's taken away, that can be hard on your bottom line.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's turn real quick to the affordable housing report from the civil grand jury. Santa Clara civil grand jury called it "Affordable Housing Crisis: Density is Our Destiny." It's a pretty strong viewpoint.
poetic
to
and
take.
alarming, eye-opening, jaw-dropping, all of that fun stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're already getting a lot of comments about this report, which is unlike any civil grand jury report I've read to date. They tend to be much more focused, much more narrow in scope.
And they respond to complaints.
They respond to citizen complaints, although I learned that with a two-thirds majority within the civil grand jury, they could start their own investigations, which is what happened here. This
Okay.
was not based on a complaint. But yeah, it's opponents are already seizing on this. I shouldn't say opponents, but people concerned about housing growth and who kind of align more with the slow growth camp are already kind of framing this as a political tool, and the grand jury kind of going out of beyond their purview. But for those who are alarmed about housing problems, the housing crisis, I mean, this is exactly kind of what they've been saying all
This is
along.
like a manifesto.
They would say, of course, the cities are not liking this report. This is
Yeah.
exactly why this report is necessary.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Karen Holman, City Councilwoman Karen Holman, was keyed in on one particular sentence in the report about NIMBYs versus YIMBYs. So yes in my backyard versus not in my backyard.
That was, to me, the most striking part of the report.
Yeah.
Because you can make a scientific case for, it's pretty easy to do, but not enough housing being generated. I mean, you look at the jobs, you look at the office number, and you look at the housing units.
Yeah,
It's
way out of skew, 3 to 1.
Yeah, I mean, Vice Mayor Phil Seth always talks about it. We create jobs in Silicon Valley 5 times or whatever, 6 times faster than we build housing. So, I mean, that's a striking statistic, and that's a part of the report that I think is pretty easy to justify. But I think the harder part is when they frame the debate as kind of NIMBYs versus YIMBYs. Anytime you create kind of this black and white, some would say false dichotomy, it would rub some people the wrong way. And it makes it a little worse when one of your recommendations is having a communication campaign led by the county to convert, as they use
That
the
was
word
the
convert,
sentence, I think.
NIMBYs to YIMBYs. So I can imagine
Yeah.
many people who don't favor big housing developments would reject the notion of themselves as just being NIMBYs.
and they'll feel manipulated by that word convert as well.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. I mean, that is probably the most highly politically charged part of the report. And I think, in some ways, I think it would make some people very uncomfortable with the rest of the recommendations.
Yeah.
Because it's framed as good versus evil almost.
In some
which is
ways,
kind of
yeah.
which is not usually how housing debates are played out.
Well, there are a number of charts in the report showing exactly how each city is doing in meeting its state mandated allocation for housing. I say allocation because, of course, the state doesn't tell each city you have to build this. It says you have to plan for this many affordable housing units and above moderate income housing units.
Yeah.
So what were some of the takeaways for Palo Alto?
Not doing so well.
Okay.
Not doing so well on the housing front. And it's not going to surprise anybody.
Yeah.
And I almost feel like this is almost like the lead of the report. I mean, you could just look at the charts and realize, wow, Palo Alto's building much fewer housing units than comparable jurisdictions elsewhere. Particularly when it comes to meeting the RENA goals. Like most of the charts have Palo Alto like third or fourth from the bottom among the 15 cities in the county. Palo Alto has by far the worst jobs housing balance. And
Yeah,
it's not
that's
even
the
close.
3 to 1.
Like
Yeah.
3 to 1. I think the next closest is like 2 to 1 or something. So it's 2.08 to Santa Clara's. They're the second place.
Yeah, and then some are flipped too, so that they have more employed residences per jobs.
Yes, San Jose, Saratoga, Gilroy, Los Altos Hills, and Monte Sereno.
Yeah.
So they're not as commercially developed. So Palo Alto is a leader in the imbalance, which is not going to be news to anybody. But yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that I thought was interesting was just the way that the report analyzed high real estate costs versus lower real estate costs, and talked about how developers are less likely to come into a high income area because their return on investment is not going to be as high if they're building affordable housing, whereas they could build twice as many or whatever units in a different city. That raises a whole other kettle of fish. Can you raise a kettle of fish?
There's actually another aspect to this that, when we think of, the first thing we think about is the high land prices.
Right.
But when I was doing an interview with a developer related to the Ventura project plan that might come up in the future, and there's talk about dense development there, one of the things that came out of this is that he said it was not just the land prices. It's also, there's two other factors involved. One is, right now, it costs a lot to have construction done. The construction costs are very, very high. And the other thing is the cycle of the market. He said, there's a boom and bust cycle, and we're sort of in the middle of the cycle. So considering when you're going to develop is another really key thing as well. So these are also things that are influencing decisions that are being made about what they want to develop.
Well, I do think the city council in Palo Alto has no control over the construction market, and they have very little control over the market prices. I mean, I guess if they allow thousands and thousands of units, they might match things. But they do have a control over a third factor. They have total control in some ways, and that's what the report focuses on. Density is our destiny. And I think another factor for why developers have a hard time building here is because the zoning doesn't allow the kind of density you need to make things affordable, yeah.
Yeah, or profitable.
Yeah, and you mentioned Ventura. I had also an interview with somebody from the Ventura group, Tim Steele, who owns it's Sobrado that owned the group. And they basically said the same thing. I was asking them about the fries and what they think could go in there. And I asked him about the potential for residential. And he basically told me residential could work, but not at the current zoning they have, which is RM 30 units per acre. It has to be like 50 or 60. And I feel like that's the kind of thing that the city does have control over. And I think if you bring up the notion of the market for construction and all that stuff, it's all very true and very relevant. But I think the people in the grand jury who wrote this report would say, yes, but nobody's forcing you to have R1 districts everywhere or to kind of abolish zoning tools that allow greater density. So
yeah, I think playing around with with R1 is the big fear of people who are, I know, in this city and certainly elsewhere, because I think the concept of density around transit hubs is accepted to some level. But they're concerned with the spread of density. How is it going to affect the traditional R1 neighborhoods? We've already seen the accessory dwelling units, the granny unit idea take off in Palo Alto, with the relaxation of some rules such that more R1s can sort of be turned into R2s by having housing in the backyard.
Gianni, did they get into at all anything related to affordable housing?
Well, yeah, affordable housing is actually a huge part of the report, and that's kind of their main focus. And they get a little about the main challenges of affordable housing, and they talk about some of the policies that the cities currently have and that they recommend that they adopt if they don't have. One of the big ones, some of the big ones Palo Alto is actually doing well on, they already have in place, like the commercial linkage fee. If an office developer, builds a commercial project, they have to pay to affordable housing fund, which would be devoted specifically to affordable housing. And even if a residential development comes in, like a market rate one, Palo Alto recently changed its fees to kind of charge even those residential developers fees for affordable housing. So yeah, that is a big, in fact, the report is called Affordable Housing Crisis. Density is our destiny.
Is the residential fee in lieu of providing BMR units within the housing complex?
No, I think
Or is it in addition?
I think it's in addition.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of just by default you have to pay it.
Okay.
And it's also worth saying that Palo Alto does have the highest commercial linkage fees in the county, $35 per square foot. And many people were outraged when Palo Alto adopted $60 per square foot because they thought that's more fair. And then they lowered to 35, so now people are saying that's not nearly enough. The people want it higher, but it's still the highest in the county, so it's
So the question is whether or not the 35 or the 60 would actually pay for the housing that they would look for.
So what kind of weight does this actually have in terms of actually getting anything done?
Well, the city has to respond to it by September 20th. So the civil grand jury can't force the cities to build anything. This is kind of more of a, I don't want to say bully pulpit, but it's they have to publicly discuss the item and have to respond in writing to each of the recommendations that were made. There were like 39, and some of them are targeted to specific cities. Palo Alto has to answer most of them. They don't have to answer about commercial linkage fees, or ADUs, but some of the other stuff. And then their response is going to go to a judge, and then the civil grand jury, if they want to in the future, they can get back to the city's responses and do some follow-ups, which is kind of rare, but it could be done. So in terms of forcing action, this report isn't going to do it. But as far as prompting conversations that could spur some action down the road by giving you all sorts of statistics and serving what other cities are doing, it may be helpful to discussions on housing, which Palo Alto is going to have tons of in the next year because of the housing work plan that they're doing now.
What is the judge's role in viewing this?
I have to research that further, but I'm guessing it would basically be just to make sure that every response kind of actually responds to the
It's in a
comment
legal framework,
and is
yeah.
substantive. I mean, assuming if you respond like in the first recommendation, none of your business, and then every other recommendation see above,
Non-compliance,
the judge would probably. I imagine the judge will tell you to do it again.
Yeah.
But I haven't really gotten
That's
into the
not
purview of
responsive.
the judge into this. So on a practical level, there's going to be a meeting in late August or early September by the City Council where they're going to have to consider each of these recommendations and talk about them. And some of them they haven't talked to in the past. So I guess that's something. And every city in the county is going to have to to do that. So
I wonder too, and I don't know if you have an answer to this question as well.
I love those questions. Hit me.
Is whether or not a document such as this would set the stage for lawsuits.
Suing a grand jury.
No. That people could use that document as a basis for suing the city or suing cities because they are not, they're saying here's the grand jury report and it's outlining what you need to do and they're not doing it and therefore, sue them. I don't know.
I'm not a lawyer, but I think you and I have seen enough lawsuits to know that when you file a lawsuit, you could cite anybody you want to in your complaint. And,
True.
They don't have any legal authority, as Gianni was saying.
Yeah.
They're not forcing cities to do this.
Yeah, but in a complaint, you could cite newspaper articles, you could cite anybody. But
And that's my point. It'll be interesting to see if people do cite it and it just spark a series of lawsuits.
That's a legal question that will gleefully duck. We'll see.
Well, there's a lot more to talk about in the report, about the report. We're going to do that also at a later webcast, but we just wanted to touch upon this for now and get the conversation going. Thanks to both of you for this conversation. We will continue it at a later date, as I said. For all the latest news on Palo Alto, go to paloaltoonline.com if you want to join the discussion on this housing topic. It's happening, paloaltoonline.com/square for Town Square. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And if you like this webcast and want to be notified of future ones, just click subscribe below. We'll see you next week.